Okay, it's 12:15, that's start time for us. First of all, I want to thank you for skipping lunch, or if you brought your lunch, we will not judge you if we hear the crackling of chips. That's totally fine. Please do it. My name is Dan Roden, I'm with Domo, and today it's my opportunity and privilege to speak with you and discuss something that we feel very strongly about at Domo, and that is reaching what we consider, let me go ahead and hit my advance button one more time, the final mile. And that is new ways to get data to your end users. Now, I've been with Domo since inception. It's been just about 8 years. And I want to tell you, very early on as a technology company, we quickly realized that what we were addressing as a technology company was more about organizational behavior than anything else. And we're going to talk about what that means as we go forward. So, just so I get a lay of the land here. If I had a coin, and on one side of the coin was IT, and the other side of the coin was business, how many of you in this room would say that you fall on the IT side of that coin? Please raise your hand. Okay? How many of you are on the business side? Okay? And how many of you kind of play both sides of that fence? I'm guessing a lot of you. Well, the great thing about coins and being part of at least one side of that coin is that we all want that coin to have value. And I have been on both sides of this coin, and I've built a career bridging both sides of this coin. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm talking about myself in many ways. But I want to start off by talking about really how we get value out of that coin and some of the struggles that we have had on this journey. And you're probably thinking, well, Dan, what is this journey? Sounds kind of marketing-ish. It kind of is, but it's really true. The journey we're talking about is eventually getting the people in your organization the right data, the right time, in the right place. That's the final mile we're trying to get to. Because when we do that, when people have the right data at the right time, wherever they are, I don't care if it's here at the Sands Expo, at Terminal 1, over at the airport, at their child's soccer game, or sitting at their desk. When they have the best information possible, they can make the best decisions. And that's what drives the value of that coin. So let's talk about how we work together. Now, I truly believe that visual aids help really sink a story into your minds, and so pardon me if I get a little too, maybe not creative is the best word, but maybe a little bit too storytelly. But in 1981, Atari came out with the 2600. Are there people old enough in this room to remember Atari? Okay, excellent. Does anybody remember the game Kaboom? Okay, all right, great. I gotta have to explain the whole thing to you. Kaboom was, I think, one of the greatest games of all time. What it entailed was this character here. This character, on the side of that coin, I'm going to start on the IT side of the coin. This is kind of how the IT side sees the business user. Kind of an 8-bit character looking to drop a bomb on them in the last minute, because this is what the business user usually comes across as. They're the boss. They need data. When do they need it? ASAP. Why? Because they got a big meeting. Does that sound familiar to any analysts and IT shops out there? Last minute request. Hey, I got to have this. I got to have this. Last minute request, I'm going to do a big meeting. Big meeting? About what? I just need data. I need stuff. So I got to go in there, I got to look smart. Well, the fact of the matter is this happens to us a lot on the analyst side. We do get a lot of requests dropped on us, either in a timely or untimely manner. But part of that is the way that we've set ourselves up to do so. We are very few in number in comparison to the rest of the business users in a company. And we have to build a process to allow this kind of funnel all of those requests down. The problem and the challenge that we're seeing in our customers and in our prospects when we go and meet with them is that the data is not slowing down. The requests are not being reduced. And IT budgets aren't expanding to handle said requests. In fact, it looks a little something like this. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a little gameplay here, if I can get this to work. Are you ready? So here come the requests, and they're coming down. And this is only when sales is requesting data from us. And at the bottom there, we have our analyst team handling all the requests just fine. Well, then finance hears that sales is getting all this great data, so they start dropping their requests. And we're keeping up pretty good as an analyst team and a BI team. We're running around catching, but the problem is the more data requests that comes in, we are not turning into analysts, we are turning into report people. And we are nervous that if we drop one of these bombs, whose fault is it? It's our fault. And it keeps coming. And we're now just catching. We're losing people left and right from our team because they don't want to work in this environment. And all we're doing is just trying to keep our mouth above the waterline. This is all we're doing. And this is what's happening at your organizations and tens of thousands of organizations just like yours until one fateful moment when, boom, the report that was supposed to be ready for a board meeting or an e-staff meeting was either not ready, it was ill-prepared, the metrics were inaccurate, and where does that blame fall? What side of that coin? The IT side of that coin. So already there's some animosity. But like I said, we have kind of built that because we've had to build a process where everything comes through the funnel so we can control it. And it's tough. Well, how did Domo address that first problem? Why does everything go through IT right now in your organization? Why does it? Because you guys know stuff. You guys have access to the data. Most business users don't even know where their data resides in your organization, whether it's in a data lake, a data warehouse, whether it's in some sort of on-prem system, whether it was something custom built, whether it's sitting out on a cloud service. They don't know where it is. All they know is they need access to it. And for the most part, you guys have control and access to those systems. So at Domo, the first technology we had to really kind of break down was that silo mentality of some data lives here, some data lives here. That's just one department. What about multiple departments? What about multiple offices? What about when we acquire new companies? What do you mean we have 2 instances of SAP? What are you talking about? We knew we had to address that challenge first, so we built the most elaborate connection strategy possible. We have over 500 enterprise connections to various different sources of data anywhere in your company, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud, that allow the IT side of this coin to effectively collect and put them into one place, with have control, governance, and all manner of tools to allow you to effectively get a handle on everything that's in all the data that flies in your company. That's step number 1. Great, we've solved that problem. What's next? Well, now it's the business side. The business side of this equation is going to be told by a story Bugs Life. Pixar had a great story about these ants. The ants, there are many ants, and there are a few grasshoppers. And what it came down to was the ants would collect a bunch of food and give them to the grasshoppers. The grasshoppers, there were like 10 of them. And the ants kind of got tired of it and eventually rebelled at some point and said, hey, you know what, we can do this on our own. Well, to the business users in here, I think you'll understand, and I'm one of them too. Remember, I've been on both sides of this coin. And for those of you on the IT side of the coin, this might be interesting to you. But let me kind of tell you the story of what it feels like as a business user to go request data from really smart people. It's intimidating. In fact, this is kind of like the best picture I can think that represents it. The ant is the business user, and the grasshopper is the really, really smart data scientist analyst. And all we're trying to do is just get something changed. And this is kind of how it feels. This is kind of how it feels. But it's okay, because we're both from different worlds. The business user is just interested in, look, I just need you to change the chart type from horizontal to vertical, and I don't understand why that's going to take a couple of weeks for you guys to do. Because remember, I got that big meeting? Why is it going to take that long? Well, the response usually is, have you ever heard of process? Have you ever written a SQL statement in your life? Do you understand it's not just a simple change? And that is true. Because on the IT side of it, it is very governed. It is very systematic. It's very programmatic. Again, 2 sides of the same coin. All we want to do is be worth something. Why is this so tough? Well, business moves at the speed of business. And unfortunately, On the IT side, we can't have a one-to-one relationship with the analyst to business user. It just can't happen. It's not scalable. So how did Domo address this issue? We already connected all your systems. How did we address this? Well, we felt it imperative to lessen the burden on the IT side of that coin and to make us all more valuable. Why can we not leverage the masses? Why can we not allow these thousands, tens of thousands of ants to self-serve? And look at their expressions. They're like, hey, we're happy to help because, guys, believe it or not, they want to help the IT side relieve that burden. That's not their goal, is to drive new requests down that already crowded funnel. Why? Because they know that it's a burden on the company, and they know that it's not going to drive the value. It doesn't help anybody to just keep stacking that up. So they start asking questions like, if there's a chance you could just hand me like a curated data set, then I can just kind of self-serve. I can build my own stuff. Or somebody might say, I can change those date ranges if you just gave me access to the report. I don't want to, trust me, I don't want to bother you to change dates. I know that's a pain. Or if I simply had access, I could probably do most of this on my own. I'm pretty tech savvy. Well, here's where we're at the impasse. Because when we're on the same side of that coin, what happens is the way that we have been engineered is that the IT side has the data, the business side keeps sending all those bomb requests, and for whatever reason, we spend so much time internally fighting around processes and complaining about each other. In the military and the police, they call this something very particular. They call it blue on blue, where friendly forces are firing at each other and they don't even know it. This is one of the most tragic things that can happen in a military or a police instance, and it's a tragedy that it's happening in our companies. So how do we address this? Well, we have to look at the source, and this is where technology, I told you we were a technology company, but we quickly became an organizational behavioral company. It's because of this step right here. The technology, we feel like we've done a really dang good job of building something outstanding. And if we want to service the business user, how do we do that? Well, we need to be able to allow the IT side of the fence to be able to curate, package, securely send data or give data to a business user and say, go nuts, build your own stuff. But we can't hand them something that's so technical that they're like, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what this is. I'm pretty good at Excel, but I don't write queries. I don't understand the cardinality of this data. So Domo built one of the easiest to use front ends ever created in technology with power to allow them to self-serve. Give me the data, I'll build my own stuff. If I need your help, I'll come back. In fact, I'm going to come back because I know I'm going to have some questions, but I'm going to give you the easiest way to share and communicate and collaborate back and forth around this data that we've ever had in an organization. And know that does not mean download, copy, paste, put it in Excel, send you a spreadsheet. No. We're going to communicate live. We're going to iterate live. And once we're done, it's set to a source system. We don't have to touch it again. I'm not going to ask you for a report this month and then ask for that exact same report next month. Why would we do that? It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time on both sides of that coin. So we built this amazing front end to allow business users to be not intimidated to self-serve and to build their own metrics, build their own reporting. Great. Now what? Technology to manage the data, control the data, done. Front end that the business user can use and collaborate, set alerts, leverage artificial intelligence to help them know what to look for in their day-to-day work, done. Oh, by the way, you can see it anywhere on your mobile device. You can be at your desk. I don't care where you are. You can run your entire business on your phone, done. So what's the problem? Why are we still here? Why are we still stuck in the middle of this journey instead of that final mile? Well, let me tell you. It all started in 1986 when one of the best albums ever released came out, and that was Janet Jackson's Control. And that's what this is really about. Let's think about it on both sides of that coin. If I'm an IT professional, the last thing I'm thinking about is the Wild West of data. Oh yeah, just have everything, take it. Heavens no. In fact, you shouldn't have that attitude. Your responsibility, you have been bred to control the safety of information within your organization. Who can see what? Are they looking at accurate numbers? Do they understand how these things are measured? That is your role and that is your job. That's a control factor. And from a personal, more emotional element, it's also job security. I was an analyst at Major League Baseball for 4 years. I built my entire career off of one spreadsheet that nobody else knew how to use but me. The problem was, I was really good at that, and that's all I really did for that company, and I locked myself. Had no career path. Why? They didn't want anybody, nobody else could do it. Job security, yes. Didn't grow in the company. Didn't do what they really hired me to do, but I was really good at that spreadsheet. Okay? There's a control issue. I understand that. I feel it. I felt it here. From the business user side, what's the control problem? There are politics associated with data. Don't let anybody tell you there's not. There are people who are sitting in offices who have gotten to those offices by being able to corral certain numbers and be the answer person. Oh, that's my number that I report to the board. Oh, that's my number that I can control. And why do they want to control that number? Job security. Looking important. Feeling like they got a pulse on their side of the business. It happens. It just happens. I've been on that side too. I'm talking to myself here. So this is the emotional element of this. The control. There's an emotional element to this data, this problem that we're solving. Well, the other one that comes with control and the lack of it was most clearly expressed to me at a very young age in 1980. I'm the youngest of 6 siblings. I have no idea why my older siblings allowed me to consume some of the content I did as a 5-year-old. But in 1980, I saw the scariest movie of my life. And maybe some of you have seen it. It's The Changeling with George C. Scott. Has anybody seen this movie? Okay, if you don't want nightmares, don't watch this movie. I don't care how old you are right now, but if you really want to get freaked out, go watch this movie. It ruined me. Scared me. For the first time in my life, I knew what fear was that didn't have anything to do with about getting bit by a dog or anything that was painful. This was like real, like emotional fear came from this movie in 1980 to me. Why are we afraid to lose control? Because of fear. What if I share the wrong data? What if the data that I share goes into the boardroom and people are building reports off of it and it's not the right data and I'm going to be the one to blame? What if I open up my numbers a little bit and I'm the manager of marketing and I actually share my lead data with sales? What if I'm in sales and I show my pipe to everybody else? It's kind of scary. It's a transformation that needs to happen beyond technology. And this is really how we're starting to inject ourselves into a conversation. We're finding that from a technological side, we have wonderful, wonderful solutions. But there are still things that we need to address. Now, I want to bring up 2 people, Jason Burby and Ben Shine, both from Domo. And I want, this all sounds like, this is a good conversation, a good topic, something to think about, right? We're all sitting here thinking, yeah, that makes sense. But can we really get to that final mile? Can we really get to the point to where, as IT professionals, we feel comfortable opening up that data, controlled as it might be, to the business user? And as a business user, are you ready to take responsibility for your business and the management and the measurement of it so that when you walk into eStaff, you know your numbers inside and out? And there's really no one to hide behind except for yourselves. Are you ready? We find that with our customers, we find some are more ready than others. But those who take that leap, who are ready to go that next mile, they know that it's not just a technology problem. There's emotion, there's people, there's content, there's the tools that are necessary to do this. And we're going to have Jason and Ben come up and share experiences about our customers and also Ben's previous time at Target and how that was exactly implemented there at Target. So if you bring up Jason.
Appreciate it.
You bet. Ben.
Nice job.
I'll grab that from you.
Okay.
So my name is Jason Burby. I'm the Chief Customer Success Officer for Domo, and we're going to share some stories and learnings that we've gathered from big customers. 36% of Fortune 50 companies leverage Domo, but really companies of all size, where we can get in and really talk about what's happening. As we look at this and see there's a few things. We have seen a few things happening where cost of storage is going down, IT budgets are increasing, but data growth is increasing even faster. As Dan outlined, the number of requests that come in are growing even faster. And so what does all of this mean? Ultimately, it's not about the tools. It's not about specific capabilities. It's unlocking that cultural transformation. How do we all work together? How do we shift our organization? How do we see what can be available, what can be possible in that fashion? We're going to get in and look at a few questions, but I wanted to start out with a recent McKinsey Institute study that talked about the biggest challenges of companies is turning insights into outcomes. Insights into outcomes. That they really are talking about the last mile. They mentioned the last mile in their study. And really what that means is that is how we get in and unlock data. That's how we get in and really realize the value of analytics. There's a tremendous amount of information spent on data. How do we get it to the people that can make decisions? How do we get it into their hands to truly unlock that value, where they can be using it every day to make decisions? I want to introduce Ben Shine. Ben joined us a number of months ago, and he is VP of Data Curiosity and Innovation. More importantly, or of equal importance, I should say, Ben, you came from Target where you were Senior Director of BI and Analytics. You had 6,000 monthly active users in leveraging the data, which is a huge last mile initiative, obviously. Yeah. And so wanted to have you share some examples that you've seen, not just at your time with Target, but your time working with Domo customers and just your other peers in the industry, and really share with us what the last mile means to you and what you've seen help drive that. But before we do, wanted to talk about the data curiosity journey, which is, I know, something you're very passionate about. We look at emotions, people, tools, and content. Share with the group what your viewpoint is on these.
Yeah, so part of my decision to join Domo 5 months ago really came from an understanding that as I looked at what we were able to achieve at Target, the 6,000 monthly unique users, the way that data was changing the culture, that there was more than just the tool, that there was something else going on here that helped us start getting to that final mile and really turn the corner. And so in the last few months, as I've had the chance to reflect on my 10 years at Target, as I had the chance to look across industries, across countries and cultures and different companies, and really look back on that, what sort of started popping to me were these 4 buckets, right, of how did it happen. And it is interesting because I don't think it actually starts with the tool, even though we're a platform technology company, as Dan talked about, that really the biggest pieces that made us successful at Target, and I think are making Domo customers successful as I get to meet with them across the world, are more about the emotional side, the people and how we manage our people, and then we actually can get to what tools are we using and what content are we developing. And so it's really a different kind of approach, and maybe not natural if we're on the IT side, to take that step back and say, before we get to the actual tool and the content we're creating, we need to deal with our emotions and we need to deal with the people.
Yeah, I get that. Why do you think most companies struggle with the last mile?
So, if I look back at sort of some of the emotions I saw in a big company like Target, I think a lot of it, I talk about a dynamic that a lot of our BI infrastructure was sort of created in this approach that was was end-to-end development, right? So it was, I'm going to fully solve this specific problem, whether it's a report or a specific business decision or whatever it was. And when we did that, we had a limited number of engineers, and we would sort of pick the most important thing and then hope, over 6 months or 3 months or 9 months that we'd solve that. And then what would happen is we maybe would get that done, maybe we wouldn't. New problems came up, and we weren't actually getting to that. And that created all this emotional baggage within the organization that people just stopped asking about information, right? When we talk about like changing a culture of data, it's not, we want everyone in the organization to use data if what you're working on happens to be one of our top 10 priorities. We want everyone to be using data. And so rather than thinking about things end to end, I like to think about it as end to almost end, right? So how do I not get so focused on solving one problem? How do I get focused on creating an infrastructure, creating the BI systems that empower people to solve lots of problems? as opposed to just trying to go after one after another, which we just never had enough resources to go after.
Yeah, you mentioned end to almost end compared to end to end. Can you give an example of that?
Sure, and one of the points when it crystallized for me was, again, looking back at my arc at Target, I remember in 2013, I was sort of thrown in front of our capital committee with the CEO and the CFO and all the C-level officers, and I had to ask for $2 million to finish some project around digital promotion data in Oracle. And I felt awful. I'm like, why is it costing all this money? And I knew probably it was going to come back and it wouldn't even be the right data, and I would disappoint my business partners and all these other pieces. And it just, that to me was this epitome of like, we were trying to do the right thing. We knew we had a problem. We needed digital promotion data. We knew we wanted to do all this work, but it just, everything was just, the machinery was just so slow. And so then if I fast forward a few years after we started making the shift to end to almost end, I really remember an email I got from a buyer who was in charge of storage and organization. So the big bins that you put your wrapping paper and whatever, winter clothes and stuff to store. And she sent an email just after Thanksgiving, around this time of year, saying, you know, I really loved this real-time data and reporting that we had on Black Friday. But, you know, for my business, the Black Friday is the week after Christmas. That's when everyone's buying storage and organization, and that's when, like, we're putting the bins on sale. And she was like, well, if you could just give me something that was maybe similar and all. And I read through it and I'm like, oh my God, she was like emotionally stunted. Yeah. Because she had gone through so many years. And this is someone who actually had the guts to send me an email. Mm-hmm. How many other people out there actually weren't saying anything because they just learned, oh, I asked, it's going to take too long or it never happens. And so, but by the time that she asked in 2015, we had started to make this transition. So rather than being, you know, okay, well, sorry, it's going to take 6 months or we won't be able to get it, we'd already built a flexible end-to-almost-end platform, largely leveraging Domo, so that my team could say, well, you know what, it's not $2 million to the capital committee and a year later for the next holiday. Let me spend an hour with you and show you how we can actually tweak and adjust the data we already had for Black Friday and then bring that to life. Yeah. And it's sort of all those pieces of like, how do you do that? And that, again, it's because we thought with this end-to-almost-end perspective, not solving a specific problem every time we did stuff.
Yeah, I love your views on emotion and emotion tied to data, both good and bad. Can you talk a little more about that and what you see there and how you leverage that or avoid it?
Yeah, no, and I think, look, sometimes I joke, it's like we're like data therapists, right? It's not about the data, it's not about the tool even. It's like there's all this baggage that we have to help sort of get people through and to acknowledge. And some of that just comes to a sense of empathy, right? Empathizing with what someone has gone through, empathizing with the value of the past, right? Like not what they did in Excel or the old report that you know, like Dan was doing on his own in Excel had value. There's a reason why it resonated. And some of that is we have to sort of, you need to bring people through it. Like it is way harder to get that cultural shift than to implement a tool, right? Like there's challenges to implementing technology, but those are very known and finite. But a lot of it was how do I bring people on that journey? So one of the things that I found is you have to make people experience the change, right? So we had developed a new dashboard for merchandising at Target, and you know, we had done all the right things. You talk to the business users, what are the key decisions, what are the data sources, all those things. And so we brought in a small group of 15 buyers to test it. And we brought them in the morning at like 8 a.m. and we said, okay, we're gonna just let you play with this. Roughly, here's what it is, not a lot of training, just go. And we had people sitting there with them and writing down what they did, and then we gave them an hour and a half. And at the end of that hour and a half, we said, okay, great, here's the 20 things that you have asked about, either shifting or new data or whatever it is. We sent them away, and we brought them back at 4 p.m. along with some of their executives, and we said, great, we heard you. Here's the 13 out of the 20 that we've actually already addressed in just a few hours. And it was sort of like these light bulbs going off because they needed to see that for themselves. They needed to understand that them becoming part of the data conversation had benefit to making their jobs better. And I could have sent a million emails, I could have sent, you know, different training sessions and gone to team meetings and all these things until they had that emotional experience of actually feeling, oh, I can engage with this, it's gonna be valuable to me. That's when it started shifting. And that's when I talk about data curiosity, That's the curiosity we need. It's the flexibility and the end to almost end is worthless if I still have a group of team members that won't ask questions because they don't think there's anything that could come from them asking questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. When we look at digital transformation or when we think about the final mile or end to almost end, talk about the time it takes to get there, what organizations should expect, what the steps are, what that time really looks like.
Yeah. And like I said, it's harder to measure and to impact human behavior than it is to do the technology part, right? So I think certainly with the AWS stack, with Domo, with other tools, like you can get a lot of the data ready. I think you need to just continue to provide the ways to interact and to sort of work with the data. And to, again, teach people that it's okay to ask a question and to come back. One of the analogies I like to use a lot in this space is that often, sort of with the picture from A Bug's Life, you could feel like, I felt like sometimes people would show up to our data scientists and they maybe, they have a cold, they have a data cold. And it was the equivalent of going to the Mayo Clinic, where I live in Minnesota, right, one of the best hospitals in the country. If you show up at the Mayo Clinic with a cold, they're going to say, you know what, we're specialists. We have all this special equipment. We have all these specialized doctors. We're curing cancer. We can't help you with the cold. But the problem is, where's your urgent care, right? So like, I would go to urgent care for a cold, and those doctors are generalists. They're specialized in triage and all these other pieces. So part of what we did, and again, this takes time in terms of investment of resources and also just teaching people over time, was create an urgent care for data at Target, right? Create a space within the main headquarters building, which we weren't always, the IT sometimes gets pushed out to the side or to the other campuses, that we were able to then be there in a very everyday present kind of way, so that people, when I have a cold, I can't get this report to run right, I need data that I don't understand, that we were there to support them on an ongoing basis, and that took a long investment. That doesn't happen, you can't do that once and say, oh, well, no one showed up, I can't do this. You have to continue to hammer that home. And no, people have day jobs, right? People still have day jobs to get through. They're not going to always do that, and so you have to create those different rituals or different interaction points to let people sort of come and do that.
Yeah. So we're all on our phones constantly. What role does mobile play in end-to-end or end to almost end as you think about this and empowering, not just with at Target, but what you're seeing across the industry?
No, I mean, I think mobile obviously is very important for everything, for digital transformation and all these other pieces. I would caution that sometimes we might slide back into end-to-end when we get to mobile. So it's like, well, to get it on mobile, it needs to be more specialized development and all those pieces. And so I think that part of it is ensuring, and something that, that attracted Target to Domo, and I think was part of our journey at Target, is it needs to also be end to almost end for mobile. It can't be, oh, well, here's this great desktop thing, I have a lot of flexibility. Oh, but what's on mobile is really stayed and not, right? It needs to be, as I'm changing and trying to do things for Black Friday or whatever it is, it automatically shows up on that mobile app, and I have that ability to sort of interact with it. I think, sort of the next iteration maybe of that mobile is like, how can I do even more on mobile? How can I not just look at data, but analyze data, add new data, all those things? Because again, mobile is all parts of our life, not just viewing the data from the bank. I'm going to make a transaction, I'm going to do other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot about digital transformation. There's been a lot of conversation here, and a lot of times digital transformation is external. What are we doing with our customers as companies? But in many cases, there's the internal example of that. A great view of that for all of us that fly and travel a fair amount. You look at the Delta app, one click you can get in and see what seat is there. You walk up to the counter at the airport and you ask the Delta representative, hey, can I switch to a different seat? And immediately before you finish asking, there's the clickety-clack, right, where they start doing it. And they're pulling up what appears to be 300 screens, 2,000 keystrokes, and you get there. So when we talk about digital transformation, a lot of it comes down to data and the last mile. What are the enablers and the limiters you see on that in terms of that internal data transformation?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to some of the fear that that Dan talked about. I think the biggest thing, and it's independent of the tool set and the data, is getting yourself comfortable with not having control and with empowering small teams to be innovative on their own. right? And some of that is, I think, working at a very large company like Target is you're constantly trying to find ways like, how do I get innovation and the goodness that you have in a startup with 4 people, and how do I sort of infuse that innovation into the organization? And for a long time, we maybe sort of tampered that down, or we let sort of alignment and governance win over that. I think if you really want to transform as an organization, you need to start getting more comfortable with, I'm going to allow for pockets of innovation to happen, and then I'm going to have the right tools and data to maintain alignment and to sort of do that. And I think one of the interesting dynamics we see, talking to companies across the world for Domo, is a lot of times there is that fear. It's like, I don't know if I want to give them access to add data or whatever. In a little ways, we're fooling ourselves, right? Because we might think that we don't give them access now, but we don't, and then they're going and doing it in Excel, and they're sending an email to someone else, and all these other pieces. And I'd much rather create a platform that maybe empowers them in a little bit different way. That can be a little scary, but then I have the data to be able to monitor, who's doing what? Is this going to the CEO? Is it not? Is it being useful? Maybe that's something we never thought of, that this person out in this little business unit has a really good idea that we can help scale to the entire enterprise. And so it's not about being irresponsible. It's not about wanting chaos. But I think you need to get yourself comfortable with the idea that you're going to start letting people innovate and then have the data and technology that lets you manage and align that, as opposed to starting from a place of full governance and locking down and then hoping the innovation comes somehow.
Yeah, you talk about locking down and the importance of being able to share data. Can you share your view on the idea of managing by exception? The idea of we have all sorts of data. All of us have plenty of data. How do we do a better job of managing by exception, and what does that mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's a big piece of, it doesn't always, it's a good lesson too, it doesn't always have to be complicated, right? If you have a lot of data, how do you start finding the relationships and then finding the ways that you can alert people and do things? And certainly at Target, we have had a lot of leading indicators, right? Like when we had spikes in call center volume, we would get an alert in Domo, and that might tell us, hey, there was a pricing issue, right? Whether it was good or bad. Lots of people are calling and saying, hey, this item looks like why is it $200 for candy bars? Or conversely, they might be calling and saying, hey, it looks like it's $1 for 100 candy bars. Is that real? And in either case, those are all these leading indicators. And when you have all this data, not just call center, you have stuff coming from Pinterest. We had internal search on the Target website. You have people asking a question in the store and they're typing it into their device. The more that you can bring that together, both for the exception and then at a place like Target that's so broad, it's also a very classic sort of classification data science problem, right? Because it's like I have all this information. If I'm going to effectively alert a buyer who's in charge of one department, I need to have some sort of algorithm that helps me start classifying it. And doing it at a scale that, again, okay, now I can actually leverage my data scientist in a really powerful way, because it's not about just working on an algorithm that doesn't have a business impact. I can actually create the exceptions and then alert people that can take actions there. And then, of course, the holy grail is, sometimes some of those things shouldn't necessarily have to have a human interaction. Some of it could be automated back into the system.
So talk more about that, the holy grail.
Yeah, well, to me, the holy grail, and we certainly didn't fully get there at Target, there's 2 parts of it. So one is like, okay, do you get rid of humans? Maybe that's not really the holy grail, but again, just human error you can eliminate. But I think the other thing to me is like, how do you continue to integrate data and analytics and insight into the actual workflow products that an organization is using, right? So when I'm making a decision about what to price something or what promotion to run, or if I should, send a snowplow out to the parking lot, how do I have the analytics fully embedded into the operational system? And then I can sort of measure that, right? So I can say, hey, if I showed half my pricing analysts this insight or this chart or this data or this algorithm, and half of them another insight, what were my outcomes? And then I can actually tie business outcomes back to the kind of data and insight I'm giving someone. Yeah. And in that way, it sort of becomes, we're actually using data to drive our best practices for the business. As opposed to, the proxy is usage and engagement, and you have other ways to estimate that. But for me, the holy grail is if you could fully have that loop from business outcome back to decision with the insights you wrap it in, then you can continually get better the same way you A/B test on a website.
Yeah.
to optimize what color the banner is, right?
Continuous improvement, no doubt. So at Target, you had plenty of tools. You had all sorts of historical data, everything else. What would you look for? What were the things you would look for in terms of solving that last mile? When you were evaluating new tools or new platforms, what would you look for?
So over the years, we sort of crystallized around 3 core capabilities we were always looking for in this space. And they were speed to market, scalability, and collaboration. And what I generally found, and this is, life is about trade-offs, but I felt I was just getting really frustrated that I was being forced to make trade-offs between those 3 buckets, speed to market, scalability, and collaboration, prematurely, and in a way that put the business at risk, right? So it's, a lot of times, well, do you really need that data, or do you really need that scale? Well, what if I was summarizing at the division level, and then the actual real problem was at the item and location level? It wasn't just about, well, I need more data for fun. It was, I'm making a bad business decision because my tool is not scaling. And then if I wanted to go to scale, then maybe I had to shrink. So I had to say, I'm just going to do this for one department. Well, what happens when the other department wants to do it? Now I got to rerun my analysis and republish it. And then maybe if I wanted something that really scaled, it couldn't happen quickly. So then I would use a tool that would let me do it more quickly, but I had to make some of these scale consequences. And then it wasn't easy to share and all these things. And so I just felt this just tension that I was making bad decisions for the organization, and it just felt like the trade-off was happening too often. And again, it doesn't mean that you don't eliminate all trade-offs. There's always decisions about how much data and where, but part of what we tried to do was, again, sort of move up how far we had to make those decisions so I could do more data, more quickly, more collaboratively, and then that's what enables that final mile, because now if I can load item, location, week data into Domo or a platform like that, then I no longer am requiring all these little groups I'm trying to encourage to be innovative to come back and ask for data. The team working on new small format stores in Manhattan can use that data in one way. The team working on new private label brands can use the data in another way. The team that's responsible for storage and bins can use it in a different way. And because I didn't have to compromise as much between the scale and the speed to market and the collaboration, all of a sudden I started being able to have that different power. I think the other thing that's interesting is inherently within a business, you have different priorities, right? So the marketing team doesn't necessarily know about the merchandise sales plan. It doesn't mean it's not important to them. It means it's not number 1. It might be number 10 for the CMO, but if I don't have a way to share and collaborate so that the person that's the expert on the sales plan can share their information with marketing and vice versa for the CFO, impression spend might be number 11. That's where some of that collaboration piece came in, and really finding a way to have all 3 of those simultaneously at a level that answers way more of my questions, and I'm not continuing to just leave out all those little things that never got prioritized in the past.
We look at culture, we talk about people, we talk about different departments. What would you look for as you were adding people to your team? What would you look for in terms of skill sets, attitude, approach, thinking?
I mean, for me, the number one thing, I put it in my title when I joined Domo, is curiosity, right? I think the one thing I know is that the tech stack will continue to change. What we use, how we use it will continue to change. And so certainly at Target, I would maybe get someone who was a candidate who had a lot of retail experience, but maybe only with one tech stack, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And that would always concern me because, again, I know that things are going to change. And I think the core competitive differentiator on talent, for companies, is having that flexibility to be able to move between platforms, technology, try new things. Oh, that didn't work, let me go over there. You need people that have this mindset of, I'm going to try a little, I'm going to ask questions. Oh, there's something new, let's test into it and see if it works. And so for me, if you want to create this new culture, you need to have sort of that inherent curiosity. Yes, you need technical skills, but I'm less concerned with a checkbox of, do you know Python, do you know R, do you know this? Yes, I wouldn't want someone who has no technical skills, but I want technical skills in the context of curiosity, not just technical skills for the sake of a checklist of technical skills.
And then from the flip side, not your team, but people out in the business, when they came to you, what were the traits that you knew you could work very well with them, that they could be successful? What were the things they'd need to have, or the things that would be red flags for you?
Yeah, I think The willingness to ask questions is a big one, a big piece of it. So it's maybe a less technical curiosity and more of a business curiosity. And I certainly had my fair share of times when I would end up poaching someone who started in the business and seemed very analytical and was curious and willing to learn, and so I would bring them back. And I think, again, it's an openness to iterate, to leverage the flexibility in a way that made sense, because back to like the coin analogy, we're all trying to do the same thing. It's two sides of the same coin, but how do we really work together to drive an objective, and not just, I think, with the video game, it's not just about asking for a report or a piece of data. It's like, what are we trying to solve? Are there different ways we could try to solve this together? And can we use data to then measure that, right? Okay, well, this wasn't helpful, or was helpful, or this campaign was successful with this kind of data. How do you need to have that conversation, I think. And even at Target, there were definitely times when I would get frustrated, because I think the old way of doing things, at least at a Target, was sometimes you would just sort of, you bottle up all that emotion and that frustration, you grunt through it, you deal with it, and then eventually it's so bad that you complain up the chain, and it goes up here, and then they're over here, and there's a process team, and then they come back. And I was like, if you had just come to our open lab, or if you just reached out to us, then we could have fixed 90% of that problem 6 months ago after an hour, right? So you need to change how that conversation happens, and to do it. Otherwise, all the work of a flexible platform and end-to-almost-end, all these things, it sort of goes out the window if you don't have that kind of partnership with the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. So before we open it up for questions, people can step up to the microphone or just raise your hand, and we'll repeat the questions. But what are the three takeaways, and go into them a bit, the three takeaways for the audience on things they can do as they go back to their organization to drive that last mile of data and insights?
Yeah, so one thing I would do is I would try to find one dependency or blocker that you can eliminate for your team and for your business partners. And that might mean, opening up one data set that right now is more restricted. It might mean providing, one level lower. So right now I'm providing, regional level data. Can I give them location level data? But just try to find a place where you're blocking, or you're creating a dependency that's probably hurting your team as well as the team needing that data, and then measure it, right? So say, okay, well, now we're going to give access to this table. How many people are using it? How much engagement do we get? How much of a reduction in one-off requests are we getting from the team? And I think it not only helps the people asking for it, it also makes your team more excited because they're not dealing with little one-off questions. I think on a more global scale, the second thing I would do is commit to this idea of end to almost end, to take a step back and say, are there places where maybe we're building to solve a specific problem that if we took a slightly broader lens, then we can maybe solve more than one problem at a time. And I think that could get hard, especially for engineers. And I love engineers, but it can feel a little bit about sort of going back to old waterfall days of you shouldn't talk to the business. You shouldn't, the business problem and what we're trying to do as a business always should be the inspiration of what you're doing. But sometimes you need to take that step back and sort of say, okay, well, how can we solve multiple problems? Even though maybe we're not talking with the business as much on each one, we're empowering lots of problems to be solved. And then the third thing is to try to think about ways that you can encourage and incent curiosity, right? Whether that's carving out time for people to try new things, or measuring different pieces. I think I'm a big fan of OKRs and how they worked, and so my team had a specific key result around number of people that came to our open lab sessions, right? And so that made us think about it more, right? That made us promote it more, try different things, teaser emails, talking to people, all those kinds of pieces. And so again, when you measure it and when you find ways to incent that curiosity, I think you start seeing those little bits of change in the culture. And sometimes you don't even notice it at first, and then all of a sudden, oh, wow, people have really changed the way they're working, and it's sort of exciting.
Yeah, good. I've got a couple other questions, but wanted to pause. What questions does anyone in the audience have for Ben, his time, and last mile? Go ahead.
Yeah.
When they talk to their business users, they're legit, who are business analyst type of
Yeah. Yep.
But then the challenge that we normally face is they don't want to be able to control. But at the top, if you go to the decision makers and make that decision, and is there like we are actually doing this journey right now. We have multiple cloud platforms, Azure, AWS.
Yeah.
But then what has helped us is talk with the decision makers first, and then say that rather than going bottoms up, top down, and it has worked for us. Is there any?
Can you repeat the question, Ben?
Yeah. So the question is a little bit about like how much are you working with sort of the top level decision makers, and then how much is it more the people with control or maybe generating it?
They are the ones who are pushing back, and we don't want to change. Right?
So the resistance is down here, and up here there's support. I think that's true. I would say that I think you need to come at it from both ends, from grassroots and from the leadership. So there certainly were a number of leaders, from the Target CEO to his direct reports and others, who walked the walk and were using data, and that helped. But it also only got so far. You also need sort of the grassroots support and people sort of using it day to day. And it goes both ways, because sometimes, right, people want to emulate the leadership and listen to what they're saying, but people also, there's peer pressure is an incredibly powerful thing, right? So if you're in a meeting and all of a sudden my peer looks really awesome because they had better data and could speak more eloquently to their business, and then your VP is really excited, you're all of a sudden saying, well, what are they doing, right? So I think you sort of bring both of those together. I think one of the moments where I was most excited about, again, just changing the culture about how data is used at Target is we were opening up a new store in Soho or someplace in Manhattan. And after the store opened, there were a number of executives who went out to dinner, and some of them had access to the data in Domo real time of how that store was doing. And they're talking about it, and the head of investor relations was there, and he didn't have that card. So then he emailed me. And again, it's not the most impactful, right, decision. Having it in a restaurant is not necessarily changing the decisions we made, but having data all the time, everywhere, changes your culture. So the fact that they're sitting at a Manhattan restaurant and talking about data changes how they think about it versus before when it was like once a month they would get a report and talk about data. So that was, and that comes from that top level, but then also filters down from the bottom.
Other questions for Ben? Yes, in the back.
Yeah, so the question is around how do we set up our delivery teams to meet the time to market and some of those pieces. We took very much an approach of trying to create small agile teams. We sort of specifically did not want to call them scrums because we didn't want people to get sort of, I need to be a scrum master, or I need to take this certification. Although our chief data officer always would just call it a scrum, and we'd be like, no, we're calling them agile teams. But really it was about how do we create small teams that have the right set of skills, right? So it might be an analyst, an engineer, sometimes it was a couple people in Minneapolis, maybe someone in Bangalore, who then were either aligned to a priority or to a specific leader. And again, as we built tools that let them be more and more effective, they didn't have, that small little team could have sort of be accountable for their own little mini end-to-end products. And so we definitely thought about it as, in our Center of Excellence for Data Analytics, we had 80 or 100 little mini agile teams that were set up and that could sort of react to the different places. I think one of my agile coaches, mentors, always talked about the idea of like, how do I create strong teams and give work to teams instead of surrounding work with people, right? So I think that was very much our philosophy. It's like, you might have to adjust the charter of an agile team. They might need to have a data scientist join them for 3 months or whatever it is, but building that strong team is always going to be more productive. And you can only really build those teams if you could give them tools that allow them to be semi-self-contained with minimal dependencies. And so that's sort of how we did that. Again, that made it hard. Like some of the, sometimes I didn't know everything that was going on, right? And that's hard. And there's, from a security perspective, I did. But from like the day-to-day, there might have been really awesome data and analytics work going on that we need to find ways to collect the data from the teams, but it's about creating that alignment while allowing the innovation.
Yeah. So we may have time for one more question. Any other questions? Yes.
How did you incentivize and many that culture? Like, how did you recognize it? What steps do you do to make
Yeah, no, so the question is how do we incentivize to get to sort of the end to almost end and not just thinking about one thing at a time. And so for us, part of that came from leadership, right? So we had a chief data officer who was committed to that idea and pushed us on not just thinking about singular problems. So some of that, whether it's from your own leadership or your bosses, I think that does make a difference. I think the other piece is we had to really show benefit, right? Like whether it's for the analysts or for the business, like you need to make their jobs and their lives better. And if it's just marginally better, it's never going to actually change. And so, you know, we had a lot of people who were using other technology to move data around. We had some of our own new data movement technology, and we connected that to Domo. And really, before we had Domo as the connector on top of our own data movement tool, it was a slow adoption process. There was a group that had started this new tool, and they just sort of would use it, and it was awesome, but everyone was like, oh, I already used this other tool. And it was until we sort of, made it easy and gave them something at the end that really delighted their customers, that made it exciting to deliver data and insights again. That was a big part of it. And so, you know, obviously there's financial incentives, but I just really believe that like when I finally started seeing our analysts excited about what they were delivering, like the look in people's eyes that they knew I actually gave someone something that they were excited about. It wasn't just like, oh, I added this column to this random report and they were okay, I guess that'll work, and I know it took a long time. Like there was a palpable excitement within the team that was, you know, worth, I mean, they probably would come back and tell you they would have taken a bonus also, but it was almost invaluable just like finally having some pride in your work that before, like I felt when I was asking for that $2 million, I felt, I'm like, this really isn't necessary. And so I think giving that excitement and that empowerment somewhat does it itself, but you can't expect just a marginal improvement. Like, hey, look, we built this thing and it's like 2% better than what you had. It's not going to move it. You need to like look at those magnitudes of change and push. And certainly Paratos, our chief data officer, not only set that goal, but he also always set aggressive goals. Like it wasn't, you know, I don't want 3 times efficiency, I want 10 times efficiency. And we didn't always get to 10, but it sort of pushed us to really do something different that had the radical change in how people could work.
Right. Thank you, Ben. Ben will be available for a few minutes outside. One last thing that I wanted to share is we have a dinner tonight with Josh James, our CEO and founder, as well as Tony Scott, who was the federal CIO underneath Obama. Before that was CIO or CTO at places like VMware, Disney, Microsoft. If you lead digital transformation or solving this end-to-end final mile step, please talk to Shane Atchison, our CMO, who will be in the back corner. We're just going to pick a few more people to join us. But please join that if you're interested. Otherwise, if you want to come down and visit us at our booth, 2407, to learn more about the final mile digital transformation, please join us there as well. But thank you, Ben. Appreciate you sharing your stories and your experience. Thank you.